Hey, I'm Jeff Perkins. These are the Soundstripe Sessions. This is a podcast about the space between inspiration and execution. That's where the real story lives. We sit down with world-class creators and storytellers to unpack the craft, the creative decisions, the roadblocks, and the breakthroughs that shaped their best work. For anyone who makes things and wants to make them better. Today, I want to welcome Aaron Mercer to the podcast. Aaron is the co-president of Premier Music Group, a music supervision and strategy firm whose work spans advertising for brands like Samsung, Adidas, and the NBA, films from Wes Anderson and Martin Scorsese, and podcasts from Obama's Higher Ground. He's based in Nashville, joined Premier in 2019 when the company acquired his firm, Wool and Tusk, and before that, ran North American licensing office at Sony ATV and spent 6 years at BMI. Aaron, good to see you. Welcome to Soundstripe Sessions.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, let's start. Tell me a little bit about your origin story. Take me back to young Aaron and, where'd you grow up and how'd you get into music?
Yeah, sure. I grew up mostly in Texas when I was young, in North Carolina. I went to high school and college in North Carolina, but music was a part of my life from the time I was about 10 years old. I was riding around with my mom in the car one day and we heard Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are on the radio. And there's a great sax solo in that song. I didn't know it at the time. I said, hey, what is that? And mom's like, that's a saxophone. I said, I think I want to do that. So shortly thereafter, fourth grade, we rented a saxophone. I started lessons, and that was the path towards all things music. So I really embraced it. It became sort of my thing as I went through middle school and high school and into college. Was playing saxophone in bands all around, learning theory, learning all that stuff, and then started to sing as well. So when I first moved to Nashville, the idea was, hey, maybe I can make a go of it as a session musician and singer. I didn't last very long. I was really good for Winston-Salem, North Carolina, not quite as good by Nashville standards, in terms of singing and playing. So ended up backing my way into a job at BMI. So that was sort of the first entree into the music business. A very nice woman named Adidas, who worked at Belmont University with my wife, was kind enough to introduce me to her husband, who ran the licensing department at BMI. I didn't know anything about the music business. I mean, kids with one week of music business 101 at Belmont now know more than I did at the time. I didn't know what licensing meant. They kind of took pity on me and gave me a job, and it was BMI at the time was, still is sort of this institutional organization that looks after songwriters in a certain way, looks after a particular thing that songwriters do. I had a very generous boss there, the general counsel of the Nashville office, who sort of took several of us under his wing, and we would just sit in his office after work and kind of chop it up and learn, ask questions about what we had been through that day, ask questions about other things in the business up and down Music Row. It was exciting to be around it. It was pretty corporate. It was really corporate. It was just exciting to be around it, even though my job was schlepping, calling skating rinks and bowling alleys and having them yell at me because I told them they had to pay $200 for their jukebox, not exciting, but, a great opportunity to learn. I think when I really started to fall in love with Nashville was around that time too. We was sitting at BMI, of course, sort of anchors Music Row, there at 16th and 17th Avenue. And this was a time when people were still stapling flyers to telephone poles about shows. I think I was walking around on a lunch break and I saw a flyer taped to a telephone pole for a little concert that was happening a couple of blocks away from the office in a parking lot. It was the trumpet player I was a fan of, a guy named Arturo Sandoval. And so I called my wife on a landline and said, hey, meet me over here after work. We'll go hear Arturo Sandoval. She's like, great. So we walk over. While we're waiting for Arturo Sandoval to come out, the opening act is billed as Tommy Sims and Friends. I didn't know who Tommy Sims was. I didn't know who his friends were. But what it turned out to be, so come to find out, Tommy Sims is one of the most iconic songwriters and producers around town, has written hits for everybody. Is also a fantastic bass player, band leader, music director. And his friends, as he starts to introduce the band, are the guys and women whose names I had read on every liner note of every CD and tape I had bought. The A-list of A-list Nashville session guys, just playing Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind, and Fire and Kool and the Gang and like the greatest wedding band you've ever heard. And there's 200 people in a gravel parking lot behind a shoe store. And I was like, these are the guys. And at some point he starts calling out changes, and I leaned over to my wife. I said, I don't think they've not rehearsed. They just know these things. And when he says, let's do it in B, they're like, yep, got it, let's go. was my appreciation for sort of the musicianship and the talent that's here. And then when I went to work at Sony from BMI, I just fell in love with songwriting and the art of songwriting and being around songwriters and seeing how that happens. It remains a magic trick to me that 3 people can go into a room, at the time with a legal pad and a guitar, and now with a laptop and programming in their phone, and come out a couple hours later with something that can become, a piece of Americana that, when Tom Douglas and Alan Shamblin walked out of that room one day with The House That Built Me, they didn't know it was going to go to Miranda. They didn't know that was her story. But just the fact that it happened in that time, really fell in love with the craft, really fell in love with how it happens in this town. I think it happens in Nashville different than it happens a lot of places. Almost anywhere else. I think even just wonderful songwriters in LA and New York and London, it just happens differently in those places than it happens here. So it's really special. Wonderful journey there. And then, when I left Sony and started, so at Sony, I was started out doing the licensing, ended up pitching the Sony catalog, which was no small fee. It's like, oh, I've got the Beatles, but perhaps I can show you something in the Beatles. We have this new artist called Lady Gaga. We think she's going to be great. You should check it out. So, we had some good things to go talk about. And then when I switched sides, we built up a client base and was able to, some of them trusted us enough to say, hey, now that you're not at Sony anymore, will you come do that for us? So we became music supervisors almost by default, that we just were providing the same service, but on the brand side. And then just since then, it's just grown like gangbusters. Really proud of what we built at Premier, and really proud that I've been able to do it. I'm going on 30 years in Nashville now, so
Wow.
all from here.
That's great. Now, when you were playing saxophone growing up, was there a point where you thought, I can do this, like as a career, I could play saxophone, I could break through?
There was a point I thought I could play saxophone as a career. Yes. Being in the music business was never a consideration. I mean, that's, my dad was a career executive, had no sense of what that meant to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, had no sense of what it meant. His main question was like, do you get health insurance? I was like, I don't really know. I might, so I'll try.
Probably not.
Probably not. So, I mean, what I understood that the career in music could be would be to be a musician. I didn't have any sense of the business side of it, but once I got here and started to understand it a little bit, and again, certainly not, supervision or film and TV or creating music for picture. I was here a long time and working at BMI a long time before I understood that was even a thing. So yeah, the plan was to be a player.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you play in a lot of bands?
A lot of bands.
Okay. What was the best gig you ever played?
Oh, wow. I mean, I had some opportunities when I was even in high school. There were some, there was a pretty decent indie rock scene in and around North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Some of those bands that were on Yep Rock Records at the time and bouncing around, bands like the Connells, bands like Jump Little Children. These were, bands that were kind of around the scene. So being around those guys and getting the opportunities to play, we had some, was in some jazz ensembles that played with some pretty neat folks. Jimmy Heath on saxophone, backing him up and those sorts of things. So had a lot of fun with that. And then in college it was frat bands and party bands and, playing on flatbed trucks outside of, frat houses, just playing the hits and trying to make sure everybody had a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at what point were you just like, it's not going to happen?
I mean, I think I got here and cobbled some gigs together, and then had a couple producer relationships here that I'd made over time that they would basically hire me when the guys they really wanted couldn't do it. Mm. So I realized I was, third string, fourth string, sixth string. But yeah, just hearing the main 2 A-list guys here in town, how much better they were than me. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think I'm willing to practice that hard to get that good. I don't think I'm ever going to get there. So let's see if we can, but I do love being here. Yeah. And I mean, Nashville at the time, 1998 was a much different city than it is now, but we still kind of had a heart for it. And could see maybe there's something we can make work.
Yeah. One of our composers, a guy named Matt Wigton, he plays the stand-up bass. That's his main instrument. And he went to University of North Texas. Sure. Elite
music school,
jazz program, right? Yeah. And he was doing big band stuff. And he was one of the best musicians at his college. And then he went to New York City and he's just like, I wasn't one of the best musicians in a block,
Yep. That's exactly right.
You realize how competitive it is to really, break through it at a high level. But I love that you had the passion for music and you said, hey, there's another way in music and it's on the business side. Yeah. And that became your career path. Now, the music supervision thing, explain to people what that is, because a lot of people don't even understand it, and they just take for granted, like, oh, there's a song I know in a show. And, you don't think that there's a business behind that
Yeah.
that is actually very hard and challenging. And there's rights you have to secure to get the song, and there's payments. I mean, talk about that role and how you discovered that role.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think to your point, I think either you don't think about it at all and it just sort of, or what you think about it is that a lot of people's perception of this job is that it's just picking fun songs and making playlists and working with art. That's 5 to 10% of it. I mean, there's 89 to 90% of this job that is highly administrative, highly business oriented, legal, negotiation, all the things you mentioned, clearance. Yeah, so essentially what you've got is anytime, stepping back broadly, the 3 rights that are associated with a copyright in the law are the mechanical right, the performance right, and the synchronization right. Mechanical is when you make a copy of it. Performance is when it's played somewhere out in public. And the synchronization is when you take that copyright and apply it to picture, some sort of moving picture. It could be a film, TV show, video game, commercial, film trailer, slot machine. There's lots of things, lots of random places where it pops up. So yeah, and by and large, songwriters almost forever retain their right to decide whether or not they want to do those things. And all those instances, all those events are negotiated at arm's length. There's not, unlike with the mechanical royalty, there's not a statutory rate that is set congressionally that says this is the rate. There's not a rate that Spotify sets that says this is the payout. There's not some mystery black box that BMI and ASCAP dip into to send out performance royalties that nobody will ever understand. It's negotiated every time on a hand-rolled a la carte basis every time a song ends up in a TV show or a movie or a commercial. So our role as music supervisors is to sort of sit in between. A lot of it I like to refer to as kind of being a translator. So we will hear from the director or the showrunner or the brand or the advertising agency what they intend to do, what they're hoping to do with this piece of work film that they're making. How do you want we'll ask, how do you want the viewer to feel? What sort of emotions are you trying to elicit? Do you have something in mind already? A lot of times it's go fetch. It's like, yep, the song we're using here is, David Bowie. Great, got it. Budgets, go get it. And we go try to go get it. So there's a go fetch aspect to it too. But then there are the realities of the budget, and does the artist want to associate with this project? Is the artist interested? Can we find them? A lot of times when something's quite old and the provenance hasn't been kept up with, we go down rabbit trails of, a big part of our job is researching. We've got folks who read obituaries and look at LexisNexis and look at all these sources to try to find. I've cold called lots of grandchildren and nieces and nephews to try to find out if they have record of where their grandmother's music ended up. A lot of times that's really rewarding because they're like, we didn't know anybody still thought about her that way. And that's a really rewarding part of the process when we can find them, which we can't always do. But then you go through the business side of it and negotiate the rights that are attached to those different things. So yeah, a lot of it is fun. It's super creative. We get to work with artists in neat ways and sometimes contribute to some really neat work. But yeah, it's highly administrative too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my first exposure to music licensing, back when I worked in advertising, and our creative team had this idea. It was a fruit snack, and they wanted to, I think it was license a song, It's Your Thing.
Sure.
And at one point, the guy who ran the account, he's like, you have to drive out to like Long Island and go talk to this guy who owns like 1/4 like a share of the song.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the music industry, right? You have to get everybody who owns the rights to that song, whether it's recording, publishing, they all have to say, all right, we're willing to give this song to this project.
That's right. So if you think about, multiple songwriters on a song, at some point, ideally, when they left the room that day, they all agreed that, all right, there's 3 of us and we're all taking a third. There's 4 of us and we're all taking 25%. There's 4 of us and we're all taking 20% because the artist is going to take 20% whenever she gets her hands on this too, whatever that agreement is. So yeah, for a synchronization life, for something in music supervision, we have to get all those parties to agree. If one of them holds out or if one of them doesn't want to do it, or if we can't find one of them, then it can't move forward. So yeah, that's a lot of the sort of the organizational and kind of, goat herding responsibilities of a music supervisor.
Yeah. And I assume because you're working with a lot of creative people, especially directors, writers, they have a vision and they're like, it has to be this song. How do you manage that process as a music supervisor?
Yeah, so that happens all the time. In a film or TV, when it's scripted, when a song is in the script, that's where we start. So we'll pull those songs out. So like this character sings this song in the bathroom 7 times in this movie, and the story doesn't make sense without it. Well, okay, we have to get that. Right. And if the budget, say we've got $1 million budget for music for a film, which would be substantial, but not, crazy. So we're going to stand, if it's a Led Zeppelin song, we're like, all right, maybe that's $600,000 out the door from the jump. Now, I've got another hour and 59 minutes of movie and way less budget to fill it up.
Right.
So, you're sort of working that algebra backwards and kind of backing into this stuff. And you'll be able to get some things for that. Hopefully everyone involved has some flexibility. You've got a director who's going to be flexible, or a writer that's going to be flexible with what they really thought they wanted, but they can't quite get. So here's a backup they can live with. And you've got a rights holder, you've got an artist or a writer that was really expecting X for a fee. It's just not available, so they're going to settle for Y. So all those things are happening simultaneously. And then at any given time, you've got score. You've got a composer who's scoring inside of this that you're sort of weaving in and out, but for a film or a TV show, less so for a commercial. You're just sort of, all those balls are in the air simultaneously, but you got to start with the must-haves.
Yeah.
And sometimes those must-haves are just predicated by the budget just simply won't allow it. Or the artist simply, if it's an ad for Coke and the artist only drinks Pepsi and they draw a line in the sand, then what are you going to do? Yeah.
And so for you, as you're consuming media, if you're watching movies and shows, talk about how you think about the role of music as it relates to the storytelling. Give me your sense of that as a music supervisor.
I think most of us who do this role, we really appreciate when it's clever is not the word, when it's nuanced, when it's not so on the nose. You're like, here's a sad scene, here's a sad song, I'm supposed to feel sad, and now I do. Like that, there's a time and place for that, but it's also really wonderful. Quentin Tarantino's films are the, sort of the nexus of this idea. It's like, we can use, I can use Stuck in the Middle with You while a guy's cutting a guy's ear off, and that's awesome. And like that, nobody had really thought of it that way. And I think if they said they did, they were being disingenuous until they saw him and sort of that school of filmmakers reimagine the role of music in picture that way. And the function of music supervision itself is not that old. It's, 30 years, 35 years that it's even been a thing. Because before that, you think about even the great films of the 80s and certainly the 70s, those songs were written for the movie. Right. Or those songs, Top Gun, Footloose, those songs were written for those movies. And that's not that long ago. TV shows had a theme song, and there was no music. There was no music in All in the Family. There was no music in Taxi. There was no music in, there's no music in Friends. There's no music in Seinfeld. So that's all fairly new. But yeah, we love to see, when we can, I think we can sense when a creative conversation has been had and somebody really had a vision for, how to make this work. You think about Stranger Things and Kate Bush and just sort of how that was so, beautifully integrated into the story. That's a massive win. And it, we also see how that can be a massive win for the artist too. Right? Yeah, this really reinvigorated a career, or brought some shine to an artist who most folks watching that show may not have been familiar with. She was, super credible and important, but not a star.
Right.
That's a magic moment. Any time a song makes it all the way through the gauntlet of the different people that have to like it and approve it and all the things that we just talked about is a minor miracle. Whether it's a $500 Instagram post or a Batman 6, all those things have to happen. So I think there's certainly an appreciation on my side too for like, wow. Sometimes I'll see a song and something like, wow, I know how hard that was to clear. Good job to whoever did that, because that's a monster.
Yeah. So of the projects you've worked on, what do you put up there as your like number one placement that you've had? TV, film, anything?
Yeah, there've been a bunch, and I'm certainly proud of a lot of projects. I'm really proud of some of the work we've done for brands to kind of bring their music strategy to light and forward. All the films the team has worked on, our creative directors Randy Poster and George Rakulius are sort of legends of the business and the things they've contributed to. I'm just excited to have my name associated with the same organization theirs is. I don't touch any of that stuff. It's great and they're wonderful people, so it's nice to see that stuff. The work that George did on Barbie is crazy. The way that resonated culturally was insane. All that stuff is great. I really, probably the thing I'm most proud of all of it, if I look back, is going back to being in Nashville and being able to do it here for so long is, you know, my career here has paralleled pretty evenly with the rise of pop music from Nashville, of not country music, we'll say, of hip hop, pop, rock, anything that's not country. And so even from the time I was at Sony, being able to get to know, invest in, help a little bit, the artists that are here that are making pop music and determined to make a living, you know, not having to necessarily plug for a country cut or not have to go on the road or be able to have a middle class to upper middle class, really nice life by virtue of the fact they're making great pop music. They happen to live here, and we're able to get it in an episode of Grey's Anatomy. We're able to get it in an episode of Gossip Girl. We're able to get it in a Samsung ad, you know, and support their lifestyle of being here and creating what they're doing here. There's the scene and the, you know, the folks I've gotten to know of, you know, Kevin Rhodes and Aaron McCarley and Mark Sibilia and Griffin House and, you know, Trent Dabbs and just that crew that's here. Thad Cockrell, just great folks, and that I've taken a lot of pleasure and gratitude in calling a lot of them friends and having been able to watch them succeed. And this part of it, this film and TV thing, be a big part of their success. It's been great.
Yeah. It seems like, especially popular music is really having a moment in television shows right now. You know, I was watching the show Shrinking, and they're just killing it. Like every episode has like great popular songs. Some are very well known, some are less known, but just killing it. Is something going on right now? Is there kind of a moment where shows are digging more into popular music, bringing it in, or is that just, has it always been that way, and it's just there's better shows now that are using music in better ways?
It certainly hasn't always been that way. You know, I think you know, some of what I think you see is that a show like Shrinking is not beholden to a 22-minute network slot. There's just more room to stretch out and more room to use a long piece of music that can be highlighted in a way that's not simply, you know, because even in an episode of Grey's Anatomy, so you're 44 minutes, there's not a ton of time. You've got that ending montage, maybe you've got one in the middle, but there's, you know, a streaming show has a lot less restrictions on how long it needs to be. They vary. They can be 31 minutes or 37 minutes or 45 minutes. You know, it can kind of work like that. So there's more room for that. There's way more in production now. There's just way more opportunities for music to get there. But I think you're right to get at the idea that the rising tide has put those top shows, you know, very much at the forefront, and then sort of the down the menu stuff of reality TV and, you know, home repair TV and all this. For not using music really at all, they're using library music. I think you start to hear those things pop a little more when you're watching Shrinking, when you're watching Rooster, when you're watching, you know, some great, you know, Stranger Things, some great premium streaming show those are kind of the only things. You know, we've lost the monoculture. We don't all watch Cheers on Thursday nights anymore. We don't all watch ER. You know, The Pit, Shrinking. Some of those shows are the only places and even then it's that we kind of gather. So I think maybe they stand out a little more.
Yeah. Now, you've been in the music business a long time. The big thing now everyone's talking about is AI. As a music supervisor, and among your peers and the clients, I mean, how are people thinking about AI and looking at AI music as part of their process? Or are they just saying, we're not going to touch that?
I think right now they're saying we're not going to touch that. I think certainly any studio, any brand is looking for savings. They're looking for efficiency, and AI does present both of those things. Savings for sure. Efficiency, I have questions about. I mean, does it really, you know, I see how long it takes some producer to do something in AI. It's like, we could have hired 3 players and a singer and been done in 20 minutes. So I don't know if efficiency is the thing. So far, you know, I think the generative AI music platforms are right now, they're a toy. You know, it's fun. Suno is inarguably fun. That's fun and funny and cute and clever. It is. But it's not a music supervisor worth their salt. And I don't think anybody wouldn't say this, but we can't recommend that to anyone. The legalities around it they're not even unclear. It's not legal.
Yeah.
You know, it's all trained on uncleared IP. They offer no, you know, the things we look for from a rights holder are a warranty that it's original, or an indemnification that if somebody says it's not original, then they'll take care of it. You know, those are standard boilerplate practice in any music license. And we have vendors who we can't work with because they don't offer it or because they're too small. You know, so yeah, we look for that stuff all the time. So, unless and until one of those generative platforms is able to offer that, and I don't see a path in a long time that they will, it's not something we can mess with. Now, do we use AI for search? Sure. Do we use AI we use Claude all the time to build presentations. It's a wonderful tool. We're not anti that. But I think in terms of generative music, it's going to be a while before it becomes available. And even on a creative level, I think most of us who do this really just like I was talking about, love the process, love the artists, love the writers. We want to see them succeed. We want to be able to contribute to their careers. We want to give them opportunities, to do what they do, to take their talent and, let that be their passion and let it be something that they can sustain themselves with. And, we're supportive of that as an industry.
Yeah. I also think about the relationship between the director, the actors, the post-production, the video editors, and they're trying to create a vibe.
Yeah.
They're trying to create emotion. And one of the people they bring in is the person that's doing the composition, the composer, or people that understand what music's available that'll fit that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's promptable. I mean, it's a very hard. I mean, it's very easy to just create music now using AI. You write a prompt, you create a song. But creating the exact vibe, and because the post-production guy is usually not a musician,
right?
And it takes a trained composer to really understand visually what's happening, what the actors are doing, and how does music, elevate that storytelling.
Sure.
And that's just something that's missing right now.
Yeah, for sure. In the scoring of it, you're exactly right. You need somebody who, to do it well, who is actively watching the dailies and actively thinking about, what is this, what's the sonic palette that I'm creating that sort of occupies the same world that these people occupy, whether it's time, place, region, their place in life. How am I mirroring that or supporting that with the choices I'm making around what sort of instruments am I using, what sort of, what are the motifs that I pick and go back to again and again in terms of the score. And then in terms of, needle drop or licensed music, the only reason that music, when you're licensing, the only value you can attach to it, because it exists in the air, it doesn't really exist. The only value you can attach to it is the emotional equity it brings. So the Beatles brings a ton of emotional equity and is really expensive. A song from an indie artist that no one knows yet brings less emotion, not none, because that artist does have a story to tell and real fans, but less, so it's valued less. Music generated by AI inherently has no emotional equity. There's nothing there that has any sort of any value in that regard. So I want somebody who's hearing this to feel something. The thing that I'm paying for as a music supervisor, the thing I'm slugging a check for the license fee for, is how much emotional equity does that bring to the picture? And for AI, it's zero.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When people learn about what I do, CEO of a music company, they're like, "Oh, AI." And
Sure.
I was like, well, let's talk about this for a minute. Quality. Do you really think you're going to get the same quality out of AI that you do out of real human art?
Right.
The answer is probably no.
No.
And then to your point, if you're using the music for commercial purposes, you have to be crazy. Do you think Coca-Cola is going to put their brand at risk because they're like, oh, let's just go into Suno and create some AI song. Oh, it sounds like Katy Perry because it was trained on Katy Perry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the risk that comes along with it is substantial. And then the thing that I think the music companies, one thing we haven't done well is make it very easy to find the right song for your project. And that's where AI, I really think, is helping us now. We have AI search in our product. It really helps you get to that right song faster. But I mean, literally, there's no shortage of music. We don't need more music especially more production type music. You just don't need it. There's millions of production songs out there. Yep. I mean, we have thousands in our catalog. There's hundreds of other catalogs out there. So there's just not a need for this stuff. So I always tell, if you're using it for commercial purposes, if you're doing a song for your mom for her birthday,
exactly. Yep.
Suno's amazing. It's so fun, right? But if you're doing a broadcast television commercial, you can't touch that stuff. You're putting your company at risk.
Well, I think what in a business sense, what producers are reacting to is the pressure from efficiency that they're getting from their holding company, their network, their studio. And so that it does, on its face, it seems like it's efficient because it's effectively free,
right?
Financially free. But yeah, the risks are real. The creative is garbage. Yeah, it's a tough road that anyone should. And there will be people that do it. Some brand will do it. Some, D2C, mattress brand will do it and not think about it, and
Yeah.
and will try. And honestly, they'll probably go fine. Like probably nothing will happen.
Yeah.
But I think I think you have to be invested, care enough about what you're doing day to day, and be invested enough in the process and the equity that music can bring to a project to really love it, and to work with work with somebody like you guys, or a reputable library, a reputable source that's pulling from real artists, that's engaging folks to create from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting that I'm hearing from a lot of our clients and prospects now is they're probably more than ever, they're one of like, why do you like Soundstripe, or why are you interested in learning about Soundstripe, or buying our products, or buying a song, or buying a subscription? And they come back to like, well, because we know you're doing real human music. And which I think is really interesting. I think human music's actually kind of having a moment now, whereas the pendulum always swings. It's gone, like everything's AI, but then people are like, well, especially think about commercial use, brands. What's important for a brand? Trust.
Yeah.
And if you're using AI generated music, AI generated video, is that a violation of trust with your customer?
Yeah.
It's really an interesting thing to think about.
Sure, and I think to some degree that's right. I mean, I think we've even there's some research now that Gen Z and Gen A are already pretty aggressively anti-AI because it in the things that they're doing, and that's whereas the older folks are putting economic pressure or see it as novel and interesting. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Whether it's a brand, acknowledging the risk, or a brand wanting to invest in creativity, or a director who just, if you've achieved something as a director, you've been able to do that by working with people. This has not been available to you, and whether you think the technology is novel or not, these stories continue to get written and told by people. And I think the music should do the same.
Yeah. So a lot of creatives listen to the show, filmmakers, musicians. What's your advice to them as they're creating, especially for people that are making film, television commercials? What do they need to think about when it comes to music? Do they start with music first before the concept? Is music kind of the thing they do at the end? Is it something they bake in the middle? What's the way that you advise creatives on how to think about music related to their projects?
Yeah, I mean, music can lead the concept. It's rare, but it certainly can. I mean, you look at a brand like John Lewis in the UK and the beautiful holiday films that they make. Music leads those things. Those are wonderfully concepted films that come out of the idea of how could we reimagine what this song could be, and they're beautiful consistently. Yeah, I mean, I think my advice is, find a music supervisor that you trust and like working with, and lean on them. Let that trust build over time. Let them get an understanding of where your taste runs and the thing that resonate with you as a director and a filmmaker, and things that move you. And you do the same with them. Let your music supervisor show you things you didn't know about before. Not just, let them expose you to things or challenge you with ideas. So when we're working on a project now, one of my favorite things, and something that has probably, I mean, it may be my confirmation bias, but something has an inarguably larger success rate than it should. So we'll send, here's 30 song ideas for your scene of the thing that you asked for. And here's 5 wild cards that you didn't ask for, that we thought might be an interesting way in. Really, really often, whether or not it's one of those 5, but one of those 5 will spark an offshoot of a rabbit trail that we'll go down. And now all of a sudden we're getting back to what we talked about. Oh, wow, this is a really interesting way in through a side door on this scene, on this emotion, on this idea, on this story, on this, soda commercial that we hadn't thought about. And, one of the most rewarding things we can hear from a client who trusts us is like, once we heard that and saw that, we couldn't think about it any other way. Like, awesome. So yeah, build that trust early. Let them guide you in the process. Look, it's not difficult to license a song. If you can add to 200, you can license a song. You can figure out how to do it. But it's about, having somebody like us on that team to leverage our relationships. It will take you a while to get those answers, where for us, it's a text away. We've got all these folks, and we've got decades of relationships across the leadership at Premier. There's, our CEO jokes he's been doing this since the Carter administration, but it's not really a joke, because it's been a long time. Yeah. And it's a small world. As you know, this is a small world of folks that do this all day, every day. So we'll try to leverage those relationships in your favor. So if you've got a supervisor working on your project, remember they've worked on other stuff that they can horse trade in your favor. So that's always beneficial. So involve us early, involve somebody who's got credentials and sort of understands the business and has done enough, And what I tell folks who are trying to break into this, I was like, look, if it's a student at Belmont or a student at, MTSU or in a music business program or one of our interns, like, what should I do? I was like, well, start with your friends and your, folks who are at your level. So if you're a student at Belmont and you get to know an a student filmmaker at Belmont in the film program, go do their thing. Because that Steven Spielberg was a student filmmaker at one point. Like, it all starts somewhere. And so start to build those relationships early. If you're a nascent director or somebody making your first feature, find somebody who is sort of, willing to support at that level and ride with you along the way.
Mm-hmm. Great. What's in your view, best all-time sync placement across television, movie, television commercial, best all-time sync placement?
Best all-time sync placement, television. That's gonna take me a while. Let's see. We talked about Stranger Things. That's a recent.
That's a great one.
That's been great. A director like Tarantino has made great choices. We obviously love, the things that Randy and Wes have done together, over the years. I think I saw a supercut of every time Scorsese has used "Start Me Up," and there were a bunch of them. So when he or "Give Me Shelter" when Scorsese just goes to the Stones. Yeah. I'm trying to think of something a little more. You mentioned Shrinking, which is a great music show. There's some great things that have happened. Alex Patsavas has done so much great work across the things she's done and launched so many careers, out of the hotel cafe scene. It's something that we've really liked. I think of one that I worked on when I was at Sony that we could not have seen coming. There was a band called Fun. And, we had, I think maybe we had one of the band members signed, and we had a producer named Jeff Basker was signed to Sony at the time, who was a producer on that record and a co-writer on a song called "We Are Young." 2010, I'm going to say. We got a call from Chevy's ad agency for a song for a Super Bowl spot. And one of our guys suggested, and maybe the guys at Atlantic too, suggested "We Are Young" to them. And this might have been in October. It's well before the Super Bowl, months before. We all kind of forgot about it, I didn't notice. And then this was in the days when iTunes downloads were still a big metric of how successful something was. So Super Bowl happens, "We Are Young" runs in that Chevy spot. And in hindsight, we didn't charge near enough for the same. But we all came to work Monday morning. They're like, hundreds of thousands of downloads last night. Man. And we're like, what? Yeah. And that's a 1 in a million.
Did that song really break Fun? When it was used in that commercial?
I'm prepared to be wrong, but I'm going to say yes. I don't know. That was certainly, it certainly predated Some Nights. It predated, the other couple songs from that record. They had been around for a minute. They were an indie band kind of knocking around. But to see how that, the immediate impact, the next day, to see how that did. And, it was that really, exciting to watch, something that I'll remember for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, that's an example where the song makes the ad to the extent, probably overshadows the ad to some extent, that it becomes like everyone's then downloading.
Yeah, with that many eyeballs and that sort of monoculture moment of the Super Bowl, those are always pretty. Incredibly hard to predict or gauge or to even get a big win out of, but really rewarding.
Okay, last question. I asked this to all the guests. If you can go back, tell 18-year-old Aaron one piece of wisdom or advice now, what would it be?
Do try to get health insurance. Health insurance support.
Health insurance.
It was. I think I did it, but I did it accidentally. I think there's so much to be said for being physically in the place you want to be. I think if you want to be in finance, you should probably go to New York. If you want to be, in and around film and TV, you just probably need to get to LA. It's not going to happen in Indianapolis as good as you might be or as much as you might try. If you believe that, that you can be a good enough songwriter, musician, you get here to Nashville. Go to the place you think your success is going to be. Get there physically. Start building relationships, start, going to things. And like I said, hanging out with people that are at your level and making those friendships, making those relationships. There's an inordinate amount to be said about, the personal connection that gets made, and we've lost so much of it between remote work and remote school and remote everything and our stupid phones. I am hopeful that we're headed toward a renaissance of doing things in person like we're talking now, and gaining the cultural benefits of that. So yeah, that would be my advice to 18-year-old Aaron is, you think you want to do music, if you want to be a saxophone player, probably don't go to Nashville, but yeah, get to where you want to live and where it's happening, and start trying to knock down some doors.
Aaron, amazing. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Soundstripe Session. Remember to like and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform, and we will see you next time. Soundstripe is the leading music licensing platform, offering the highest quality music produced by award-winning artists and innovative tools to find the perfect song for your project. Soundstripe has over 100,000 audio tracks along with sound effects and video assets. We provide comprehensive licensing coverage, whether it's a broadcast TV spot, social media video, or podcast. Soundstripe helps turn an average video into an unforgettable story. Learn more and sign up for a free account at soundstripe.com.